can bring to these solutions. Impatience matched with innovation and hopefully matched with a change in behavior. My generation, the generation that preceded me and perhaps the generation that immediately followed me, we're not great at behavior, to be honest. We need to adjust our lifestyles so that we are making an effort to support the goals of Paris Agreement. The youth can do the same and much more quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you very much. I will now move to the second project women, and I'm very happy to announce it. Why? Because we have a woman from Egypt in a COP led by a lot of gender and so on. Mona Tammen. She won the project for a 3D cutter designed from recycled electronic waste, mini CNC machine. I don't understand anything of this.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Mona Tammen, CEO, founder of the Future Leaders International Group in Kuwait and Egypt. I am an international lecturer and consultant in education technology and AI implementation and a programmer also. My project is category for women. I won the first place in women category. My project is CNC machine from recycling e-waste. First step, I collected the e-wasting, specifically printers. I take some pieces of printers, the next piece will be plastic. I reversed it to company recycling plastic to be zero waste, and also the in many parts or the next parts, I designed mini CNC machine. After that, I programmed it and to cooperate it or design with this machine and draw or any design in computer and operate the machine from computer to design any 3D shapes from any materials like plastic, wood, metal, any materials. This is 3D shapes can be used as for decoration, for industries, for accessories, and so on. Also, my project, the cutter will be use a multi-cutter like winder, like laser cutter, and so on. This is for women, especially because this women is very easy to use it, and it will be income for women to sell the product or the 3D shapes, and it to be income for women. And also I design mobile application to contact with collecting e-wasting and design new machines and new product from recycling e-wasting to help many women to work inside home. Thank you very much. I hope my project.
Mona, where are you from?
Alexandria.
Mona Tammen, yes. Alexandria, Egypt, winner of our second project. Thank you very much. I will now move to invite Iman Abu Zaid, to Head of Corporate Banking, SMEs and Syndications at Midbank. Thank you for being with us. Please, the floor is yours. You have the...
Okay. Thank you, Karim. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Mohammed, for your projects. I'm sure projects like yours will be the pillar and base that will make us move further and advance in the field of renewable energy and waste management in Egypt. I have a pleasure to be here today. I want to welcome all the attendees. I want to welcome all the media and, of course, the people behind COP27 who made this happen today. We as Midbank are very proud to be part of this gathering as we have recently launched our new identity with the slogan, empowering your future, and that's what we really want to do. We want to create a better future for all our people, for our stakeholders, and for the community as a whole. COP27 is here in order to have a just transition that remains a priority for developing countries worldwide. And that has been even proven further this time with including loss and damage as one of the agendas of the official agendas of the COP. Africa, as we all know, has always suffered from from the dangers of climate change, and has been the least that has been given priority in order to be able to move to a more sustainable energy and transformation. That said, it is of course important for us as banks to be together with the policy makers and lead the transition to a more environmentally friendly world. Which is, of course, is only possible by opening the channels and opening private investors to enter and help projects such as Mohammed and Mona's projects in order to grow and move further. That said, I want to just highlight that I just attended a few sessions before here mentioning that we in Egypt, for example, are moving more towards sustainable energy and energy development, and that we need the support of the global community in order to be able to do that, because in Africa, despite that we are all aligned that we want to do this, we are lacking the global support, given that our countries besides moving to more clean energy supply and more environmentally supply of energy and waste resources, we are lacking the global community's support, and only, I was just in a session before here, only 2% of the funds globally are directed to the continent of Africa. Despite that, Africa has many resources and many things to offer to the community as a whole globally. So I'll conclude my statement with thanking you again for being with you here, and I hope that this COP brings us all together globally to work on a better environment for us all and for all our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you very much. I'll now move to the third winner, Noor Nation, Ragi Ramadan.
Hello, everyone. Probably everyone today and yesterday had enough food on their dining table for your breakfast, your lunch, or your dinner, and also enough food in your fridge. What if next year this quantity of food will be halved, unaffordable, or unavailable, right? So please remember this. There are 2.8 billion people lacking access to clean energy and safe drinking water worldwide, most of them in Africa. And in Egypt and Africa, the agriculture sector needs more infrastructure to provide the basic services of clean energy and water in order to preserve or save the cultivation of food and provide food security. But to find a solution, my name is Ragi Ramadan. I'm the founder and CEO of Noor Nation, and Noor Nation is an Egypt-based startup, developer and manufacturer of renewable energy innovative solutions that are creating decentralized infrastructure that can produce both clean energy and safe water to empower the agriculture sector, the tourism sector, and the rural areas. Our basic or flagship product is called Livebox, and Livebox is solar-powered, all-in-one, self-contained, fast deployable, and plug-and-play unit that can produce both electricity and desalinate or purify water to also help the agriculture and tourism businesses. This is one of our latest projects, and from this project you can see that the Livebox is providing electricity to power submersible pumps for irrigation, and the water coming out from this ground well has high salinity. It goes to the Livebox in our water treatment unit, and the water treatment unit is producing fresh potable water that can use partly for agriculture, poultry, livestock, or drinking. And also the reject water coming out of the water treatment unit, they go into a fish pond, where this fish pond, they are raising fish. And you know, the wastes of the fish is very good organic fertilizers and being pumped again to the soil to improve the soil agriculture and so on. We have deployed 7 live boxes over 5 governorates and signed the contracts of total 10.5 million Egyptian pounds. And now we are looking to expand in Africa. Our vision is to empower 1 million people in Africa to provide their basic life essentials of water and electricity through Livebox. And my personal vision is to localize Livebox to be manufactured 100% in Egypt and making Egypt as an international and regional hub for localizing the renewable energy industry from Egypt to the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ragi, where are you from? Where are you originally from?
Originally from Upper Egypt, Aswan, but I'm living in Cairo.
Wonderful. So we have Sharqiyya, Delta, Skinderiya, Aswan, Masr, Agda Nas. Well done.
Thank you so much.
I really want to say again, with your permission of Your Excellency, I want to address to you three something that I always say. You've made all of us proud, and you've made many others jealous, and that's what we wanted you to do this year. Bravo and well done. Before handing to Dr. Muhyiddin, we tried to bring you an international perspective on the panel. So we've talked in desalinations, renewable, and CNC machinery. Julie Benoit, Regional Director of Group M&A, is into the transport, and she wants to talk to us about next year, let's think of green transport. Julie.
Thank you, Karim. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very honored and humbled to be on that panel among such distinguished guests, and also very impressed by the projects that we've just seen. And now I'm very eager to see what are the rest of the projects and what it will be in the 60,000 projects next year. Because, as Guy said, you guys have a very important impact on Egypt. But let's not stay in Egypt. You guys have to go to Africa and have to show the world what Egypt is really doing right now. Just a few words. So MAD is a cable car manufacturer. It's one of the most innovative, eco-friendly, and cost-effective solutions to make cities sustainable. And what you need to realize is that transportation has a tremendous impact on the environment. It's first of all 25% of the world's energy consumption. Can you imagine? It's only transportation. It's not only urban transportation, it's also freight, but still. So it means that any initiative has to deal with transport. You have to keep in mind transport. And I hope that in your next project, you'll also take care of transport. Just for a quick number, specifically in Africa, the quantities of fine particles per square kilometers related to urban transport is 5 times higher than in North America, where you can see those huge cars. Can you imagine what it means for Africa? 5 times higher. So we need to find alternative solutions. But it also has an impact on the economy. And that's where you guys also have an impact. It's creating jobs, of course. It's linking people to their jobs. But it's also just, once again, 2 numbers. Today we have friends from Lagos that will spend 30 hours in their cars in traffic jam, where we're about 3 hours in Mexico and 3 hours in Sao Paulo, which are not small cities. We agree on that. But it's also urban congestions that leads to significant productivity loss. It's 1 billion a year for Nairobi, and 8% of GDPs for Ghana. Just let's think this through. So once again, really congratulations to Egypt for this wonderful initiative. And we hope to see more next year, specifically on urban transport, but not only. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm very happy to try to conclude the session now. If you want to congratulate Egypt, I think I'll join you, everyone. We need to congratulate Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin. And to give you again the floor, I think you are behind this great initiative, and I would like to invite Your Excellency for a couple of remarks, of course.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Well, what can I say after the experts in the panel gave their own reflections on your excellent work? Thank you so much. Many thanks to the leadership of the governors, of your governorates, to the ministers who helped in the work, including the Minister of Planning, Minister of CIT, Minister of Local Development, and of course, all of the governors, the 27 governors who helped the work. But it's all about you and for you that this initiative had been created from the very beginning. Just like to, given this emphasis on global and local links, a story of a man from my village. I would like to talk about my father, but I don't like to get it that personal. He passed away 40 years ago. I'll talk about another man of great relevance to the Ministry of Planning. Actually, he was the creator of the Ministry of Planning, and the creator of the Institute of Planning, and the creator of UNIDO. And he helped in establishing other international agencies. His name is Dr. Ibrahim Helmi Abdul Rahman. He passed away in the 1990s, and he had his master's PhD from abroad, He studied mathematics, astronomy, and other things, so he was a polymath. But one of the things that he did, and I think a good application of the good advice that the developers of these projects can follow, basically how to swim in the small canals and the rivers, the seas and the oceans with the same skill and mastering the trade. It's basically, when it comes to knowledge, business, these are common languages, whether that you are an entrepreneur in a village or you are trying to grow your business globally. It takes the same kind of spirit, the same kind of resistance against shocks or resilience, and the same kind of ability to network and to apply science, knowledge, and to mobilize finance for your work. So I think it's not just about the winners. Congratulations, of course. We made us all proud in the green zone, in the blue zone, in the media, and beyond. And you made many people in this country say, well, with all due respect, if you can do it, they can do it as well. You are encouraging people from this country, from the region, from Africa, to do more. So we are betting, perhaps, with my good friend, Ambassador Hisham Badr and Khalid Bey, that we can really beat the record of this year. If we only had 3 months of preparation and get more than 6,200 applicants, and of relevance to today's meeting, we have 28 from them in top-notch projects in energy, and we have 1,789 in non-profit, given that this is the day of energy and the day of civil society organizations. So I think in every day here, I was very much with the good ammunition and the good background of information, not just in abstract general theory and generic ideas, but basically through the encounter that we had with you and the updates that we got from you, from mega to medium to small local projects to startups to women projects to the non-profit in all areas of work: recycling, energy, combating pollution, adaptation, decreasing emissions, biodiversity, and others. So you covered everything with your work, with your colleagues, those who won, like you, and those who are going to be winning in the next years, not just as trophies. Actually, I consider them winners by being able to be part in this tough competition with tough two filters, be them digitalization and sustainability, or green and smart, as we call them. Many benefits at the enterprise level, many benefits at the district, local level. Your governors, I met many of them, they are very proud of what you did because you helped them drawing the map of new investments in the governance as they should be, and you identified to them areas of strength and areas of weaknesses that need to be bridged in the future. Regionally, you are taking that through the African Union, African Development Bank, regional economic commissions, and other regions to build pipelines. But I'm happy as well that the top leader when it comes to development at the UN system, Madam Amina Mohammed, reporting to Secretary General Antonio Guterres directly, she was very proud, and actually she used almost the same words that you used, the three of you, in the panel, about the ability of these projects to go global by emphasizing their ability, by deepening their local roots and going beyond their sectors. Having said that, lots of ideas, the dynamics of finance, knowledge, and good determination, when they get together, they give us more ideas. I'm happy that this idea got a great receiving hands and support from the President of the state and of the Republic of Egypt, to the Prime Minister, to all of the ministers, and of course to all of the participants. Next year, inshallah, it will be better, and in Dubai we will have this bet against Ambassador Hisham Badr and his very able team. At least we're expecting a zero to be added to that, so multiply that by 10, and for that I'm much more practical and humble in my ambition than your good minister, the Minister of Planning. I'm not talking about 1 million, we're talking about 60,000 plus. Thank you so much. Great work.
Thank you. Before we just conclude and take the group photo with the project winners, the real champion behind the project, behind the initiative, Ambassador Hisham Badr, some concluding remarks.
Thank
Please,
you,
Fadl.
Kareem. Thank you very much. And our moderator, if we clap for him, give some applause. Thank you. And thank, of course, Minister Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen. It's always very difficult to speak after Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen because he gives a comprehensive analysis and presentation. But I want to thank him. He's the brainchild of this idea, innovative. It was a challenge to introduce it to the Egyptian people in the beginning, to be frank with you, to say what was green and smart at the same time, going to the provinces, dividing into 6 categories. So it was a steep learning curve. But we were able to do that because this is what civilization, this is what knowledge, this is what progress is all about. Introducing new concepts, getting everyone behind it, and making everyone feel ownership and partnership. And I think this is the genius of this, is letting people in the countryside, normal people, come to COP. It was difficult for us as ambassadors and senior officials to get to the Blue Zone. And today we have people from Northern Sinai who would never have thought that this opportunity would come and are with us today. So I think this is something. But as you can look at this board and you have 3 important words: action, and this is what initiative is all about. Implementation, it has already delivered. So we're not talking about raw ideas. We have already implemented. The winners are here, the prizes. Then second, you have partnership. And we have already some important partners like the EBRD and the IFC who are willing to work with us, the private sector. But obviously this exercise, and I want to thank the UNFCCC for giving us this opportunity, not today only, the last 5 days, the last thematic 5 days, to be able to share and showcase the different projects, 18 projects, 3 in each day, and able to show them and to bring them to partners. So but we're looking for more partnerships. No one can do it alone. It says, they always say it takes 2 to tango. Maybe it's not a right proverb. We need about 15 or 20 to tango. So I think we need even more partners. I'd like to end by an invitation. On the 17th of this month, in 2 days' time, the Solutions Day, because that is the hallmark, that is the climax, this is the real fruits. We will be giving from 1 to 2 in the Solutions Day in the Egyptian, from 2 to 3? 2 to 3. In the Egyptian Pavilion. The Egyptian Pavilion in the Blue Zone, Hall A. We will be giving the final remarks concerning this great initiative, where it began, where it has reached, where it will go in the future. The past, the present, and the future. So I'm inviting all of you, please put it on your calendar, on the 17th, 2 to 3, Egyptian Pavilion, Hall A, so you can hear and share. His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen will be there, the Minister will be there, and all the participants who are with us, so in order we can interact. Thank you again very much. I want to thank all the distinguished panelists from all different, France, the US, from Egypt, banking. This is the smart part, the smart partnership in the initiative, and I hope to see you on the 17th, and thank you very much, and God bless you all. Thank you.
I will ask for the photo, but with your permission, Your Excellency and Your Excellency, before I conclude, because this is the last panel that I will moderate on this initiative. First of all, I would like to thank you, but with your permission, I would like all of us as Egyptians to recognize one of the heroes of supporting community engagement and local project who left us sadly last week, Dr. Raouf Ghabour. I really want to recognize this man. He was one of the real veterans in that space. بعد إذن حضرتك طبعا. We will have a photo with the project's winner, please. I think this is a moment for you.
2030. And sorry, I'm going to be using a few acronyms. NDCs, I hope you all understand, nationally determined contributions. And what we saw is that collectively, although many countries did respond to this request, collectively the impact of these new and updated NDCs was far from sufficient. And countries were called upon to go back and revisit and strengthen their 2030 targets already this year. Secondly, we have a major focus in this year's report on the necessary economy-wide transformations that are needed to achieve the Paris Agreement. By now, it's clear that incremental change is no longer sufficient. More specifically, we look into a few selected sectors: electricity supply, industry, transport, and buildings. And we also look at more cross-cutting systems change, where we have food systems perspective and a finance system perspective. Next slide, please. But without further ado, let's move into the main content of the report. Here you can see how global greenhouse gas emissions have developed since 1990. And if we want to start with the good news is that the rate of growth in global emissions has slowed down from a quite high level during the from the period from 2010 to 2019 of 2.6% per year to about 1.1% per year in the period during 2010 to 2019. However, what we do see, and we weren't able to include emissions from land use change and forestry for 2021, these estimates were not available, but we see that without these emissions, 2021 emissions are actually higher than the previous record level of 2019. So global greenhouse gas emissions could set a new record in 2021. Next slide, please. This also sort of confirms that the COVID-19 pandemic and the global lockdowns associated with COVID-19 only had a very brief impact in reducing emissions. You can see here for the 7 largest emitters in international transport that if we compare 2021 levels to 2019 levels, in many countries these are higher. Next slide, please. Turning to the new and updated NDCs, we see that 166 parties representing more than 90% of global emissions have responded to the Paris Agreement ambition raising cycle and submitted new or updated NDCs. And in general, we see that more of them tend to include greenhouse gas emissions targets. They cover more sectors and more include unconditional elements. And unconditional elements are, of course, elements for which there are no strings attached. However, if we look at the hatched areas, and I hope it's visible on the screen, these are the countries that have responded to the Glasgow call of revisiting and strengthening their NDCs already this year. So in terms of that, progress since last year is modest. Next slide, please. And this becomes more apparent when we look at the collective impact unexpected or projected greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 of the updated and new NDCs relative to the initial NDCs. Here on this slide, you can see the impact of each of the G20 members' new and updated NDCs, with the hatched areas indicating updates since Glasgow last year. And as we can see, collectively, we look at all the new and updated NDCs. They will, if fully implemented, mean that global emissions levels in 2030 will be reduced by almost 5 gigatons of CO2 equivalents compared to the initial NDCs. But if we look at progress since last year, the number is far smaller. It's about half a gigaton of CO2 equivalents annually out of the total of 4.8. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we see that collectively, countries are not yet on track to achieve their NDCs for 2030, or in other words, there's an implementation gap. It's fine to put forward ambitious targets, but we do need implementation on the ground. Basically, that's what we need more than anything. If we only look at the G20 members, this implementation gap, which is basically the difference between where emissions are projected to be headed under the current policies and then where they are headed under full implementation of the NDCs. It's somewhere between 1.8 to 2.6 gigatons of CO2 equivalents annually, depending on how we categorize some of the countries. But the G20 members that are currently projected to meet their NDC targets have either not updated their original NDCs, they have not strengthened, or only moderately strengthened them. Looking at the global side, the implementation gap for 2030 is estimated to be around 3 gigatons of CO2 equivalents for the unconditional NDCs and 6 gigatons of CO2 equivalents for the conditional NDCs. Next slide, please. So all of this translates into a very high emissions gap. This slide shows you basically the gap. So if we look at the top line, it shows you 2010 policy scenarios. It's basically where would emissions be in 2030 had there been no new climate policies implemented since 2010. So compared to that, we are doing better, and there has been progress. You can see that the current policy scenarios lower the projected emissions in 2030. Furthermore, both the unconditional and if also the conditional NDCs are implemented, expected emissions are reduced. However, there's still a large gap from the NDC scenarios and down to the scenarios that are consistent with 2 degrees, 1.8 degrees, and 1.5 degrees. You can see the total gap numbers there, but maybe to summarize and just put this in context, updated NDCs submitted since COP26 lower projected emissions in 2030 by less than 1%. If we then add the unconditional and conditional NDCs, we get to emission reductions of somewhere between 5 and 10%. But what we need just to get on track to 2 degrees is a 30% reduction in 2030, and we need a 45% reduction to get on track to 1.5 degrees. Next slide, please. The emissions gap translate into global warming implications that are, quite frankly, scary. If we assume that countries continue on the level of effort indicated by current policies currently in place, we are headed for global warming of 2.8 degrees over the century. Unconditional and conditional NDCs lower this to 2.6 and 2.5 degrees Celsius respectively, but it's only if we look at the implementation of the NDCs in combination with the net zero emissions pledges that many countries have put forward for around the middle of this century that we get close to the Paris Agreement temperature goal. Next slide, please. However, we still see that the credibility and feasibility of these net zero emission pledges remains quite uncertain. Here you can see trajectories indicated by current levels of emissions, NDC targets, and you can also see a net zero emission targets for the G20 countries that have a net zero emission targets. What we see here is that there's a discrepancy between short-term policy ambition and implementation, the NDC targets, and the long-term net zero targets. So for now, at least, there's low confidence that the nationally determined net zero targets will be achieved. We need implementation to be scaled up massively, and we need consistency between the 2030 and the long-term targets. Next slide, please. So, in other words, large-scale, rapid, and systemic transformation is essential. And across all sectors and systems, there are 3 key issues related to this. First of all is avoid lock-in. So do not invest in fossil fuel infrastructure, for example. You also need to prepare the transition towards zero emissions, and you need to sustain deep reductions to get here. We looked at 4 sectors, and I already mentioned them there on the slide. But of those 4 sectors, we see that electricity supply is currently the most advanced. It's had a long history of significant cost reductions and technological developments. For buildings, we need to fully apply currently best available technologies. For industry and transport, we need zero-emission technologies to be further developed and deployed. And across all these 4 sectors, we need an immense increase in both the scale and the speed of transformation. Next slide, please. Turning to food systems, they currently account for 1/3 of all emissions, and they must make a large reduction. However, progress in reducing emissions for food systems, as you can see on this slide, indicating more specifically the developments in land use and land use change emissions, in agricultural-related emissions, and in the supply chain emissions between 2029 and 2010 to 2019. So we see that rather than reducing emissions, and of course this is difficult because you have increasing population pressures and all kinds of other issues driving up emissions, but we have seen limited progress in reducing emissions. Next slide, please. However, there's a large potential to reduce emissions from food systems. The chapter looks into 4 areas: demand side changes, including reducing loss and waste, into protection of ecosystems, into farm level improvements, and into decarbonization of supply chains. And the technical mitigation potential by 2050 is sufficient that, if fully utilized, it could reduce emissions to levels that are about 1/3 of current levels, as opposed to an almost doubling of emissions by 2050 from the food systems. Next slide, please. Finally, but importantly, realignment of the financial system is a critical enabler of all transformations needed across all sectors and systems. Currently, we see that investments in fossil fuels are larger than the combined investments in mitigation and adaptation. A global transformation to a low-carbon economy is expected to require investments of at least $4 to $6 trillion a year. The IPCC assesses that global mitigation investments need to increase by a factor of 3 to 7, with the highest needs in developing countries. And the slide shows the needs for an increase, both for sectors and types of economies. Next slide, please. The chapter looks at 6 actions that need to be part of changing the financial sector from being part of the problem into being part of the solution, and to really shift financial flows at a scale needed. More specifically, we look into an increase in efficiency of financial markets, introducing carbon pricing, nudging financial behavior, creating markets, mobilizing central banks, and setting up climate clubs and cross-border finance initiatives. And climate clubs could also include just transition partnerships, and we'll return to that in the second panel. Next slide, please. So, to end, incremental change is no longer an option. We need broad-based, economy-wide transformation if we want to keep the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement alive. We've heard it before, but every fraction of the degree matters, and hence so does every ton of greenhouse gas emissions reduced. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you now know why we are telling you that the window is closing. A 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions only gets us to 2 degrees. We need a deep 45% cut and at least $6 million to get us to a low carbon pathway. And so I thank Anne, our chief scientist and coordinator, for this report. And this brings us to the end of this first segment of our session today. I want to thank you very much, and right now I want to hand over to the next moderator for the second session. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, surprise, but I'm the second moderator. So I would like to welcome our fantastic panel to take the seats up here. We have a great panel, and we are especially delighted that Inger Andersen has agreed to stay on for a while at least. Please come to the stage and sit anywhere you want. Du sidder der. In fact, we have such a large panel that we had to include a somewhat unofficial chair. Thank you, Martin. So, as participants are taking their seats, I'm going to try and introduce everyone. So we have an excellent panel. Not only do we have broad participation of lead authors from the various parts, various chapters of the emissions gap report, we have Inge Andersen staying here, and also we have Bernd Hackmann from the UNFCCC, team lead of the NDC unit, and one of the key people behind the UNFCCC NDC synthesis report with us. We also have people who have more sort of feet on the ground, who are more into what it actually takes in practice to try and initiate and further transitions and transformations. And we're very delighted to have Mandy Rambarros, former General Manager of the Just Energy Transition for ESCOM in South Africa, and now Vice President of Global Climate Cooperation for the Environmental Defense Fund. Welcome. We also have with us Deepa Pulani-Katil, who's the Nationally Determined Contributions Coordinator for Eswatini. On the author side, we have, and you can wave when I mention your name, we have Nicholas Herner. He's been on the emissions gap, all the emissions gap reports ever since 2010. Welcome, Nicholas. And Nicholas is from New Climate Institute. We also have Kelly Levin, who is also a long-standing emissions gap report author, and Kelly is from the Bezos Earth Foundation. Kelly and Nicholas were two of the co-lead authors of the chapters on the sectoral transformations, and we'll get back to that. Then we have Taryn Franson, who has also been on many of the emissions gap reports, and Taryn is from the World Resources Institute. And then finally in the room we have Giacomo Grassi, who's on chapter 2 of the report, which looks into global emissions trends. And Giacomo is with the European Commission, the Joint Research Centre. Joining us virtually, I hope, maybe we can pull the virtual participants up on the screen over here. We should have Mr. Deepak Dasgupta, who is from the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, in India, and who was one of the lead authors of the Finance System Transformation chapter. And we should also have Mr. Shenggen Fan, who is from China Agricultural University and one of the Food Systems chapter lead authors. And finally, but not least, Mr. Michel de Nelson, who's also been on all the emissions gap reports, and who is from PBL Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. So now I almost spent all the time that we had for the multi-rated discussion. Sorry about that. Let's dive into it, and we're going to have a main focus on transformations, and then we're going to turn to Q&A once the panelists have had a chance to respond to a few questions. So we want to focus on transformations, and before I turn to any questions, I just want to ask Inge, do you want to say anything up front? Okay, good. So let's start with you, Bernd. Bernd, you're one of the key people behind the UNFCCC NDC synthesis report. Are there any positive developments or signs in the new and updated NDCs? Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anne. Absolutely. And I think despite all the messages we hear, despite this truth about the numbers, there's also a lot of positive in there. We looked at all NDCs, and what we can clearly see is that these NDCs, compared to where we started only a couple of years back prior to Paris, the INDCs, are much, much better in quality. So the information, the data, but also the stakeholder engagement processes, this increased incredibly. And that is, I think, or we think also in the Secretariat, a very positive development on which we can build, because it shows that governments are building the foundation for more to come. And that is one of the key facts, I think, that kind of falls off the table when we hear all these numbers, but it's certainly something very important. Another point to raise is also that we are not looking at climate action in isolation anymore. A lot of these NDCs and also the long-term strategies show how climate action is being more and more mainstreamed or integrated into development aspects and into general planning aspects. Again, this is groundwork that needs to be done for real action to happen, because it kind of shows that we are not approaching one or the other objective, but going there together, and I think that is critical. And lastly, I think what we also see, and that is maybe more in this climate context relevant, is the integration of adaptation and mitigation actions towards more a holistic approach towards climate change. And that, again, is also breaking down these silos, breaking down the understanding that we can either do one or the other, but looking at it in a more integrated way, and through that then also bringing this into the planning aspects of development planning. So there are also very positive elements in these reports, and I think we also need to keep in mind that NDCs are very new. We are not working on this for very long. It's only a couple of years back that we invented the NDCs in Paris, and ever since then a lot has happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. And maybe Giacomo, I know you have to leave early. So we heard Simon Steele also mentioning that we may be bending the global emissions curve. Do you see any signs that global emissions might be peaking?
Thank you. Well, the emissions the last years have decreased the rate of increase compared to the previous decades. This is due to a number of factors: the reduction of new coal capacity, the increasing pace of renewables, and the shift from coal to gas in many countries. But emissions are still increasing. Just the increase is somehow stabilizing, and we cannot be only satisfied by that, because as long as we have emissions, CO2 accumulates in the atmosphere. At the end, it's better to remind us that the temperature increase is proportional to the cumulative increase in emissions. So emissions have to decrease, and decrease fast. The more we wait, the more the needed transformation in our society will be difficult. And if you compare the current emission with the, as you've shown before in the graph, with the current policy point to actually an increase in emissions compared to the current ones, and only with a conditional INDC, we see a small and largely insufficient decrease in emissions. So we see some sign of change, but this is totally insufficient to address the current climate crisis.
I think I'm back on my, Taryn, you've also looked at the global landscape of both NDCs and long-term net zero emission pledges. What do you see as the main opportunities for countries to urgently scale up both ambition and implementation?
Thanks, Anne. I would highlight 4 aspects. And the first, these are not sequential, because we're in a position right now where we really need to be working across all opportunities all at once. But the first is to step up implementation of our existing levels of ambition. Anne, in her presentation, highlighted that there is still a gap between what we're implementing and what we've committed to. And implementation, when done well and at scale, can potentially beget further ambition by driving down technology costs, by creating political constituencies in support of climate action, by strengthening the institutions that are responsible for addressing the climate crisis. So that's part 1. Next, we need to make sure that our targets are coherent, that our 2030 targets are coherent with our longer term goals and with the transformations that we need to see across key sectors. I heard a very encouraging anecdote from Colombia the other day that because they were working on their NDC and their long-term strategy together at the same time, they realized that they needed to strengthen their NDC in order to be on a credible path to their long-term goals, and they were able to find additional opportunities and incorporate those into their NDC. When we look at the sectoral actions in NDCs today, we do see some gaps. So for example, in the energy, we see a lot of renewable energy targets, a lot of focus on ramping up renewable energy. We see less focus on what happens to fossil fuels going forward. In the area of transport, we see a great deal of interest in electrification. We see much less on promoting active transport, addressing freight, addressing aviation, and other key areas that will be necessary in order to achieve 1.5 degrees. We need to position our institutions so that, particularly in moments of crisis, instead of doubling down on high-emitting investments in technologies, we ensure that we hasten the transition, and that can be done in part, as Bernd was highlighting, by integrating and mainstreaming climate across our institutions. And finally, I think we can't forget the role of finance. Finance is absolutely fundamental both for ambition and implementation, and we can't deny that as much as climate action goes hand in hand with a strong economy, that countries face very different landscapes in terms of the access that they have to financing. So actually delivering on the finance commitments that have been made is a fundamental component as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn. And then turning more into the transformation part of the report and the transformation part of this discussion, Kelly and Nicholas, you're both co-leads of the chapter that looks into sectoral transformations. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and then we've agreed that I will leave it up to you who answers what. So where do you see the most positive signs of transformations actually being initiated? What are the key options for accelerating those transformations, and how can various groups of actors contribute to driving change? Because I didn't mention this in my presentation, but we actually look quite a lot into the role of various actors in driving change in the report. And then finally, how can we further transformation in sectors and areas that are currently lagging behind?
Terrific. Thanks, Anne. So I think Chapter 5 and onwards gives some inspiration for hope about what do we do about this massive challenge that we're facing. And basically, we've chewed through the carbon budget so much that we have to transform all our systems. And we have to do it concurrently. You know, the days of going after the least cost options no longer exist, given where we are today in terms of our emissions pathway. So this chapter looked at the transformations required across electricity, buildings, transport, industry. And what we saw across the board is the bad news, nothing is on track. The good news is that we know from history that we can start to see, if carefully supported and nudged, exponential change, especially when it's attached to some technological innovation that takes off in an S-curve pattern, where in the early days you would never imagine that you're actually making any kind of progress, but that if supported by the right enabling environment, you can start to see exponential change and takeoff that consistently beats analysts' predictions. And our chapter covers some examples, notably renewable energy and electric vehicles, where we are starting to see signs of exponential change, and yet they're still not on track. And yet we also need to take care of the incumbent industries. It's not just good enough to scale zero emissions technologies. So we lay out a 3-step plan in our chapter. First, avoid lock-in, because we know that investments in the current infrastructure are going to take a lot of wasted assets and time to reverse. Second, start to bring those new technologies in, ensure that those transitions are going to be just given the scale and pace of the change required, start to bring in investments, supportive policies, and the enabling environment. And then we need deep, sustained transformation. And that's going to get new constituencies to support it so that it will actually take off. Let me hand it over to you for some examples.
Yeah, thank you. And the chapter has a nice recipe or menu of options for different actors. So if you are one of them, it probably is interesting to look at it. The different actors are national governments, subnational governments, businesses, investors, and civil society as well. And as Kelly said, the first thing we need to do is not to do the wrong thing, which would be creating lock-in into something. And there we unfortunately see still a lot of lock-in happening, especially now with the energy crisis. There's a lot of new infrastructure being planned for a particular gas. So if you just look at the new LNG export capacity that's currently planned, it's twice as high as the Russian gas exports when they were the highest. So it's a total overcapacity that's currently planned, and that is going in the wrong direction. So let's hope it is not built, it's only planned and not pulled through. And that not doing the right thing or stopping doing the wrong thing, the no lock-in, that applies to all sectors, no? In industry, don't build high carbon intensive processes. In transport, don't build cities in a very sprawled way, try to do them more condensed. Or buildings, don't build buildings that are not very energy efficient. That's the most important thing and the very thing that everybody can do. But then, once you've done that, then you also need to plan to go to zero. And the planning to go to zero is also very important. In industry, it would be a plan to phase out fossil fuels in a just manner. You can do that with national governments, subnational governments. You can greatly cooperate between different actors. And you should also look into adapting the whole system for high shares of variable renewables. Then in industry, it's actually more supporting the new zero-emission industrial processes, so zero-emission basic materials. And there, I think businesses have a high role to play in planning the transition if they're on high-intensity products to go to low-intensity. In transport, it's really, and buildings as well, it's about urban planning. This is long-term. If we want to go to zero emissions in the long term, we need to plan our cities in the right way so that the transport distance is low and you can have a lot of public transport. And then for buildings, there we actually already know all the technologies. We simply have to implement them. And there I think we need to take a step change and do investment programs to do that. So there's a lot of good ideas in the report that individual actors can take on. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. And Mandy, one of the things that have attracted a lot of attention last year in Glasgow, throughout the year, inside and outside the COP, is of course the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. And as former General Manager of Just Energy Transition in ESCOM, you have unique insights to how this is taking off on the ground. And I wondered if you could share your views on how these partnerships can become a vehicle for initiating and accelerating the transformations needed, and also share your lessons from South Africa so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for this invitation to participate. I think we've had quite a whirlwind year since we conceptualized the JET partnership in South Africa, particularly in ESCOM, where I work. I worked until 15 days ago, in putting together the Just Energy Transition Plan. You know, we deal with a number of factors. So we had a number of confluence of a number of factors that led us down that road. One is we have, if you're not familiar with ESCOM, it's the electricity utility in South Africa, 54 gigawatts of installed capacity, and 88% of that is coal. So we have, on average, the plant at 43 years old. We all know what happens when you turn 40. So all of these operational issues with our plants, with the need to decarbonize, 46% of South Africa's trade exposure was being threatened by carbon border adjustment mechanisms and a number of other penalties that were put in place around carbon. So, that's a huge chunk of trade exposure. We're a semi-arid country. The amount of water being used by coal plants is quite staggering. And also South Africa is very vulnerable to the various changes in the climate. So if you put together all of those factors, you can become quite depressed. And we were thinking about how do we resolve this? How do we solve for this? How do we solve for more than one challenge at a time? And the other important one was energy poverty. So when we looked at our coal fleet, we ran scenarios, over 100 scenarios using Plexos modeling around how we could decarbonize towards net zero by 2050. And we came up with a plan around shutting down 22 gigawatts of coal plant by 2035, which is about 47% of the capacity, with a view to net zero by 2050. And by doing that, if we shut down 22 gigawatts of coal, we would have to put in 50 to 60 gigawatts of renewables as variable capacity, about 7 gigawatts of firm capacity, and about 10 gigawatts of storage. And that came at a price tag of around $52 billion US. And in order to enable that further, we would need transmission grid infrastructure for around a further $7 billion. So it's not a small price tag. And so we put together this plan and we said, as a country, through a systemic approach of shutting down coal plant, but at the same time having a very clear program of repowering and repurposing the coal plants, building grid to enable more private sector investment, and having a very clear plan of how we deal with the socioeconomic impacts from shutting down coal plant. Bear in mind, some of the plants, like I said, on average 40 years old, so you had people and communities who generations dependent on this coal plant and the coal mining for their livelihoods. So the socioeconomic impacts was quite stark that we would have to deal with. So when we looked at this plan and the JET plan we put on the table, we had a comprehensive plan around repowering, repurposing. In the past, Eskom shut down plants, closed the gates, put a padlock on the gate and walked away. But the repowering and repurposing looked at building renewable plants, repurposing through things like agrivoltaics, community-related projects, and a retraining facility for retraining staff that could work on renewables plant. So that Komati power station is our flagship JET program, was shut down. The last unit was shut down at the end of October, 31st of October, same day that I left Eskom, so no coincidence. And we had a comprehensive plan around repurposing and repowering that was funded or is being funded now by the World Bank to the tune of $497 million US to do the decommissioning, the repowering, and the repurposing. And then we had a further $500 million US agreed to by the climate investment funds to do the next plants in that transition. So I think some of the lessons learned in putting together the JET plan and talking to lenders was you really need to have a very credible, clear plan on the table, that you know what you're doing. You know when you're going to shut down plants, you know how you're going to deal with repowering, backed by engineering studies, you know how you're going to deal with the social impacts, backed by studies as well. And to do this in a coherent, comprehensive, and compelling manner so that you have a real plan that also communities and your staff buy into. The very important enablers were aligned policies. We absolutely have energy policy, industrial policy, environmental policy, and fiscal policy that aligns with your plan and supports these plans, and attracting financing terms that you can afford. If you're already in a highly indebted country, it's very difficult to attract loans to say, oh, actually, I'm going to put myself into more debt. So how do you look at attracting financing? And then not something you can do on your own. The just energy transition is a wicked problem, and it needs collaboration of government, private sector, public sector, and civil society to come together. I'll stop there, Anne. Thanks.
Thanks, and really interesting to get a perspective on the difficulties on actually getting to implementation and what it takes, and also that this has to be done while taking into account critical development priorities. We'll now turn to Deepa. You have extensive experience on technology needs assessments and also on NDC development from Eswatini and beyond. Do you see any signs of transformations being initiated, and what are your views on how to accelerate them?
Hello. Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate for an excellent report. It's really helpful and useful. For Eswatini, yes, I would say that transformation is slowly and surely happening. Our NDC, the revised NDC, has more sectors and more contributions, and also quantifiable economy-wide target, which is a new thing we didn't have previously. And for a small country that only emits 0.007% of global emissions, I think it's a quite ambitious NDC. And we've also been fortunate to have built on the technology needs assessment process as we did the first INDC and the current revised NDC. So in that process, we were able to build capacity of stakeholders and also utilize the outputs of the TNA for the NDC. And yes, we still have a long way to go. Just building on the previous speaker, energy security is for Eswatini. We only produce 30% of our domestic energy, which is 100% renewable through hydro, solar, and biomass. But we import 70% of our electricity from ESCOM. Yes, and so now our contract with ESCOM is expiring in 2025. So this is a great chance for us to really transform and move into a completely 100% renewable energy sector. So in that aspect, all the work that we've done with TNAs has been very helpful. And also our National Development Plan is an NDC-aligned NDP. So in that aspect as well, we are trying to move into a more climate-smart development process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, really great to get actual examples of how this needs to be done in practice. Now I'll turn to our virtual participants, and thank you for your patience. So Deepak and Schengen, I'm going to ask you the same questions, but the answers will be from finance perspective and from a food systems perspective, respectively. At least that's what I think. So the questions are, do you see any signs of transformation of the finance or food system? And what are the key opportunities to transform these systems to enable achieving the Paris temperature goal? We'll start with Deepak and then move to Schengen.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We hear you, and we
Okay.
see you.
Thank you. So, listening to all the panelists, what is clear, I think, is that finance is a huge paradox. It is a paradox in two senses. Without the financing, you're not going to be able to make any of the ambitious plans and changes that you wish to see in climate. At the same time, the paradox is that where I sit in the finance world, we have incredible amount of resources available, but these have fundamental structural barriers that prevent us from being able to cross the divide to work on climate. And it is, so while we see some signs of progress, the progress is like 7% tracked finance flows rising a year, when we need to be at a level which is 5 to 7 times greater. So the gap between where we are and where we need to be is so large that we need actors to send absolutely clear signals. And governance to us, in the chapter that we looked at, is the fundamental player. Paradoxically, governments don't have the finance. What governments do have is policy and a sense of mission and a sense of purpose. They are the orchestration that needs to happen. The finance which is sitting there is waiting for governments to act, to send clear signals. So that's why this $100 billion a year goal that we often talk about is just bare bones. That is not even the scale that we need finance on. The scale that we need is really going back to Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, making finance system consistent with climate goals. In order to do that, we talk about 6 big steps, 6 actions that need to be taken, and these, we presented the slide before. I'm not going to deal with each of those 6 subparts. What choices do we have at this time are really dependent on things that South Africa are doing, and things that have to do with make sure that we are able to figure out in every circumstance the binding constraints to making finance flow. And we are absolutely sure that it can happen, but we are not sure that governments have actually decided where they want to come out. It's not just governments. Governments are orchestrating. It has to start with the financial players deciding that they're ready to.